Welcome back. You're watching NewsX with me, Devika Devan. US President Donald Trump has said America gets along with India very well, but the relationship was one-sided for many years since New Delhi was charging Washington tremendous tariffs. As he made his first public appearance this week, there were no tough talks over India's purchase of Russian oil or its warming up to China, as several had expected following the SCO Summit. In fact, the last couple of days have seen top Trump aides adopt a more measured tone as far as India is concerned. A softer and tacit messaging has been given in response and in counter to the barrage of sharp criticisms that was seen just weeks ago, which saw India being dubbed as Kremlin's laundromat. Even Trump's remarks at the White House were more tempered and focused on the trade imbalance with India. He said that for many years, the relationship between India and US was one-sided, and that changed when he assumed office. Donald Trump cited the example of the Harley Davidson motorcycles, saying the company couldn't sell into India because there was a 200% tariff on the same. Even his post on Truth Social was devoid of the usual bluster and his all-capital, high-octane statements. The Trump administration seems to be softening its tone towards India, or is that so? We take that conversation forward. I have with me on the broadcast Mr. Andrea Lucidi, war reporter from Moscow, Mr. Andrew Latham, professor of international relations, joining us from the USA, and Mr. Raymond Vickery, former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce, also joining us from Washington, D.C. Mr. Vickery, I want to begin the conversation with you. I want to understand from your perspective, do you see that there's a change of tonality towards India as far as Donald Trump and his administration are concerned?
Well, I think that there is, thanks very much for having me. I think there is some change in tone. If nothing else, Donald Trump shows that he is not consistent in his approach and even in his rhetoric. That having been said, I think the basics of the Trump mistakes on tariffs are still there. He does not recognize relationships in building. What he recognizes are transactions. And in transactions, there's a winner and a loser, and he's going to be the winner, and the other side will lose. The idea of a win-win relationship is foreign to his outlook. It is completely irrational for him to have taken the approach that he has taken in regard to the so-called reciprocal tariffs, based upon his view that somehow trade deficits are like a profit and loss statement. There are many things that go into trade deficits, particularly the U.S. savings rate and other economic factors. But he doesn't recognize that. And this first 25% is some sort of back-of-the-envelope calculation that any trade deficit is illegitimate, has been imposed by India on the United States, and he can rectify it. He's made a second mistake, of course, in combining that so-called reciprocal tariffs with his approach to Russia and buying Russian oil. If you're going to have an economic strategy in regard to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which is altogether laudable, since the Russian invasion is really a breach of the UN Charter to which India was a founding member. That's fine, but to single out India while you let China off on some supposition that you're going to have a G2 arrangement, and you don't even really look at what is happening in Europe in regard to Russian trade, much less the US, that's completely irrational also. So we have a basic difficulty in this country. President Trump viewing things in transactional terms. It's all about him, his ego, his aggrandizement. And of course, this really difficult and horrible situation in U.S.-India trade is reflected across the board in problems that we have with the Trump administration domestically. One hopes that the change in tone, the Indian American community, the business community, our own checks and balances will ameliorate this disastrous situation. But thus far, there is no sign that President Trump has a strategy or is looking at India as the great partner which it should be.
All right, Mr. Andrew Latham, your perspective on the same. I want to understand, do you feel that there's been some sort of a change as far as the words that are being used, the attitude towards India? Because we were expecting a slightly different reaction in response to the SCO Summit.
Well, I think what's been demonstrated in the last 24 hours is that President Trump is indeed economically illiterate, but he's not entirely geopolitically tone deaf. He must have seen some footage of the SCO Summit and all the glad handing and backslapping. I think the implications and ramifications of that summit were grossly overstated in the Indian and American media, but they made an impression. And the impression was India is definitively drifting out of the U.S. orbit to the extent that it's in the U.S. orbit, which in Trump's mind it ought to be, even though in reality multi-alignment is the grand strategy of India, sometimes on Team Russia, sometimes on Team USA, but always pursuing its own national interest and not belonging to any bloc. But that's not how Trump sees things. And he sees India slipping away, and so hasn't changed the policies, but he's changed the rhetoric. He's changed the tone of the conversation a little bit on the margins. In his own mind, perhaps that's decisive. I think it can't hurt to soften the rhetoric, but it can't also repair the damage to the bridge between India and the United States. That's going to take a while, and it's not going to just be in terms of platitudes and tones. It's going to be something much more, it's going to require some more profound repair work, shall we say. With respect to the limits on Trump, just one thing I'd like to highlight is that there is a system of checks and balances in the United States. It's not within the White House, but the Supreme Court and lower courts are beginning to take up the issue of whether or not President Trump has authority to impose tariffs the way he has, usurping Congress's prerogatives under the U.S. Constitution. That hasn't gone as far as it needs to quite yet, but the writing is on the wall. He's probably going to be found to be drawing outside the lines, as it were, and to be exceeding his presidential authority constitutionally, and those tariffs might just go away, might be struck down. It remains to be seen how he would react to such a decision, but I think such a decision is imminent, just around the corner. So, two things, one of which has got to do with American domestic politics and constitutional checks and balances. The other one has to do with Donald Trump's tone. Not a diplomatic bone, I think, in his body, but somebody around him must have said, Mr. President, wake up, smell the coffee, as it were, and change your tone with respect to India.
All right. Let me bring in Mr. Andrea Lucidi into the conversation as well. Mr. Lucidi, I want your thoughts on the same as well. Of course, there's not been any change, particularly in the tone towards Russia. In fact, the President of the United States of America has come out and said that China, Russia and North Korea are conspiring against the U.S. at the Chinese Military Day parade. But how exactly are these developments being viewed in Russia?
Well, of course, this is, from the point of view of Russia, is completely ridiculous. And the behaviors of Donald Trump, it's a little bit strange, because after the meeting in Anchorage with Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump himself said that was a big honor to have Vladimir Putin, and that their relationship is always strong because they are personally connected as a friend. And now this declaration in Russia it's read as a nonsense. I don't have any other words. For Russians, and for the public opinion. It's very strange that Donald Trump chose to desert this meeting in China, because his presence could be very, very interesting for a new approach from the foreign policy of the US. But in fact, he chose to stay in Washington and desert this meeting that here is read as a very important meeting from the global south and for a possible new asset of the world. A lot of Russian magazines and journals say that this meeting, the SCO meeting in China, is the base of a new asset of the world, and the presence of Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, the Premier Minister Modi is a big signal to the West and to Washington, because it's like if they want to construct, but to build a new world without the US, without the West. And for the Russian perspective, it's clear also for the economical side that the West, it's not only the unique partner in the world. And for India, how India is seen from Russia is a big important partner for the future, especially in the IT technology and in the IT industry. And of course, Russia will not miss the chance to have a strong relationship with India also through the meeting in China.
Right, absolutely. At the same time, Mr. Raymond Vickery, I want your thoughts on this as well. The fact that there is a change in rhetoric as far as India is concerned, but there's a major allegation coming against China, Russia and North Korea. Is the United States of America now being very careful in not involving India in any of these, in bringing it into this sort of a narrative?
Well, Prime Minister Modi in India have tried to very carefully calibrate this by not attending this end of World War II celebration in Beijing, which had Xi and Putin and Kim. His presence was not there, and so it is more difficult. And I think India realizes that it does not want to be clubbed with Russia, China, and Kim, particularly on the strategic side. The difficulty is that India has to act in its own interest, and I would hope that its interests include the values which are enshrined in the Indian Constitution, the worth of the individual, the rule of law, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Those are not shared by Russia, China, or North Korea. I think India is very cognizant of it. So Donald Trump has, through his heavy-handed approach on tariffs, really forced India further toward the authoritarian countries. But India has its own values, and it's not going to, in my judgment, give up on those values and simply become a part of overall strategic programs which Russia, China, and North Korea have. And hopefully, over a period of time, the institutional factors that have been indicated are going to right this ship of state and able to get us back on the upward trend that U.S. and India have been working on and been largely successful in building over the last 30 years.
All right. Mr. Andrew Latham, your thoughts on the same as well?
Couldn't agree more. I think that when you look at what motivates states, there's a lot of moving parts, but two big parts are interests and values. And America shares many Indian values. Let me put it that way, the reverse of the way people usually put it. And that inclines them towards alignment. They simply share some fundamental views about the human condition, about the way society and politics ought to be organized. There are differences, big differences, but they're on the same page, especially when compared with China. And even this iteration of Russia. I think Russia has a more complicated history than that. Sometimes those values are on prominent display in Russian history, other times not so much. But then there's interests, and this is what accounts for India's multi-alignment. It's pulled by interests and values toward the West and toward the US, but it's pulled by other values, solidarity with the global South, for example, and other interests needing to be somewhat equidistant from the other great powers. It's drawn into this grand strategy of multi-alignment, as I said, sometimes on this team, sometimes on that team, always pursuing its own interests and advancing its own values, defending its own values. And that is very difficult for a lot of people to grasp, but especially, unfortunately, for President Trump to grasp. I really do think he kind of gets that we're no longer in the unipolar moment, but he doesn't get that what that means is that there are competing camps with different values. And not everybody has to subscribe to the American, to sing off the American hymn sheet, as it were. He doesn't quite get that. He wants everybody singing off that American hymn sheet, and it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So he needs to adjust his, not just his rhetoric, that helps, but he needs to adjust his policies, his strategy, America's strategy for the next 3.5 years, so that it comports with those realities and doesn't run headlong into those realities. I think he kind of got, and Prime Minister Modi made the right move, not being there for the Victory Day parade in Beijing. I think that was the right move because, once again, he's signaling as well. Our relationship with Russia and China goes so far, but no farther. And it may be just optics, it may be just theatrics, but in politics and geopolitics, rhetoric, optics, and theatrics actually matter a great deal.
Absolutely. And Mr. Lucidi, I want to bring you back into the conversation. When we talk then about rhetorics, we've just witnessed some of the first talks that have taken place in Alaska, but there is now once again a shadow of doubt and fear, rather allegations that have been placed against Russia, including North Korea and China as well. How do you see this now impacting the way forward?
Well, I think that the role of China especially can be very positive for reaching a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. It's necessary to build security guarantee for Ukraine, sure, because without this guarantee, Ukraine will not allow any ceasefire or peace agreement with Russia. But from the SCO meeting, we hear that it's possible, and Vladimir Putin himself say that it's possible to build, to search, to find new security system, security guarantee for Ukraine through other partners like China, like Belarus, like the country of the so-called third world or the global South. There are a lot of countries that are in BRICS or are not member of NATO that can be partners of Ukraine also in the security, for security measures or for the defense sector without the involvement of alliance like NATO that is completely unacceptable for Russia. Meeting like this can be another way for reach a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. I'm sure of that, but it's necessary, this is my point of view, it's necessary that all the actors that are involved in the war will show availability for reach the peace.
Right, absolutely. And with that, we've run out of time, but I thank all of our guests for joining us from across the world to take this conversation forward. We step into a very short break.